do. The other message I make, whether it's posting on social media, knocking doors, making phone calls, just embrace the fact that it can seem wildly inefficient. That you may only have an impact on one or two people per shift, and that's okay. Because if you think about your individual effort in the aggregate, and 5 or 10,000 people are also doing it that day, that's how we can create in each of these states hundreds of thousands of voters who may turn out, which is much bigger than our win number. So I hear that a lot, understandably, which is I went door knocking in Wisconsin, and I literally think I only impacted 2 people. That's okay. Just go into it expecting that and know that like the fate of the world's right in front of us. We're all going to do our part.
So if the average person is trying to figure out who they're trying to reach, and they're like, well, I have members of my family or neighbors who are pro-Trump. Should I be spending my time trying to convince them? Or should I be trying to convince the people who are on the fence and they're leery of the Democrat, they don't love Trump, or people who, are supportive of the Democratic nominee opposed to Trump, but you're worried they're not going to get out and vote? If you're thinking about those 3 categories of people, to the extent people are being so rational about their time, what's your advice?
I'm glad you asked that, Preet. So I would not spend a minute on anybody who's hardcore Trump. I talk about this in the book. There's formal activity and informal, and we all need to do both. So informal is your friends and families and colleagues. If you have somebody who's currently not registered and doesn't want to register, you need to find a way to convince them to register. Somebody who says they're not going to vote is a huge target, or maybe they might vote third party, which was such an important reason Trump won, was the high third party margin. And then there's a true swing voter who's conflicted. And part of what I capture in the book is we're going to win this election both with swing voters and with people who are at risk of not voting. These aren't people who are going to be having our nominee's bumper sticker on their car or truck. They're cynical about politics. And I actually use this phrase in the book. Somebody who's holding their nose in voting or is apathetic in voting counts the same as me or you. And I think sometimes as Democrats, we want to get up on the soapbox and preach. And we want to say, no, Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders, they're going to be on Mount Rushmore. I think the conversation that may work is, you know what? I'm not super excited either. Okay, but let me just tell you something. You care about climate change, they'll get back in Paris and they'll get rid of Trump. I hope they do more than that. If that's all they do, we got to meet people where they are, not where we wish they were. So that's important. And then the formal volunteering you'll do through the campaign, they'll have great data. And so the list you'll be calling, if it's good, will be only people they're concerned who are true swing voters, or people who may be flirting with third-party vote, or that massive group of people who are registered who aren't sure they're going to vote. So those are the key categories. And in all of the battleground states, there's more of those types of people than we like. So whenever I get, concerned about our ability to beat Trump, and I think he's going to be hard to beat, I just remember there's more than enough people in all the battleground states, particularly when we do some smart registration over the next few months, to beat him. Our problem is execution. And the best debate answer in the world and the best ad from our nominee will not be as effective as the right human being talking to the right person who's conflicted about the right thing. The power of that is still the most effective conversation in politics. And I think we all need to take ownership of that and kind of make our own plan for activity in this election. I'll give you an example. I live in San Francisco now. Most of my friends out there aren't in politics, but a lot of them are progressive and they want to know what they can do, right? And so we talk about that. And I say, have you made your plans to go to Arizona? Well, I haven't. I'm not sure. I'm like, I really don't want to talk to you. You kind of deserve Trump. If you're not planning to, spend 36 hours on the ground in Arizona, you can't make that happen. That's what it's going to take.
But should they go to Arizona to work on the general, or should they go to Arizona to work on, candidate Kelly's candidacy for the Senate?
Well, you kind of get a twofer there. And what's interesting is 2 of the I think just essential battleground states in the presidential race, Arizona and North Carolina, are now must wins in the Senate race as well. So the energy we need to bring to both of those states, we can win the presidency without winning either of them if we do what we need to in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, or Arizona. But to me, I'd rather not risk that. But we know we got to win both of those Senate races. So I think you get the real pleasure of helping out on both.
I'm going to go back to something you said a second ago and see if you could amplify it. So I'm on social media. I have mixed feelings about it. There's a lot of toxicity, but there's good stuff that happens too.
Quite talented at it, though. But yes.
I have my moods. But most of what I see, and maybe just the people that I follow, and I do this myself, it's saying negative things or critiquing the president. And I thought you said a couple of minutes ago that the more productive thing to do is for there to be positive posting about the candidate you support. Why is there so little of that? And what do you give us some examples of things that might be productive? That, and also, by the way, maybe people would be in a better mood if they tweeted more positively.
Right. Well, because, you see today, I mean, even if Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders gave the Gettysburg Address today, given what Trump, tweeted about the coronavirus, you feel like you've got to express your anger as a citizen before you even do as a Democrat, right? So he drives a lot of that. So I'm not saying if Trump does something outrageous and you want to comment on it, you shouldn't comment on it. But so if our nominee gives a really compelling interview on Jimmy Kimmel, and it may be like 30 seconds, that's not even about a policy, right? It could be something, Joe Biden talking about, Bo or something, and you send it out. You see a great infographic they put out about the difference between a Democratic president in the next 4 years and Trump for 4 more years on the environment and climate change. Send that out. And I think what you'd say is, you post this on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and say, this has me excited, right? If you're out volunteering, capture that on social media. Do an Instagram story and say, I had a really great time today. I think I made a difference in Pennsylvania. So I think we have to realize that we missed that. I know I missed that in 2016. It was all anti-Trump. And that's where all the energy was. So I think it's also important because I think there's a sense in our party right now that no matter who we nominate, it's not the second coming of Abraham Lincoln or John Kennedy or even Barack Obama. And so we don't have a savior. So I think we have to work to show people that we can still be excited.
What about this other issue that is of increasing concern? I had a prominent professor on the podcast last week talking about deepfakes, and he made the point that these things can upend elections because there's a lot of mistruth out there. And even before you worry about deepfakes, you got to worry about shallow fakes. And I'll give you an example of something that happened just this past weekend, and millions of people saw this. They saw a grossly unfairly edited video of Joe Biden where Trump supporters are trying to make Joe Biden look foolish by cutting a clip in which he is saying, we can only reelect Donald Trump. And that's playing on an endless loop, I think millions and millions of views. When what Joe Biden actually said was, in totality, we can only reelect Donald Trump if, in fact, we get engaged in this circular firing squad here. What's the role of people in trying to police the truth about the candidate?
Right. Well, that can be frustrating. So you have to do both. You've got to share the positive content, the positive sentiment, what's motivating you. But if you see something like that, so you're Uncle Jared, post that and say, see, this guy's, he's senile, he's not ready, fire back with the actual lengthy clip. And, there were conservative voices who were criticizing that as well and thought it was deceptive and put that and say, it's just a lie. So when you see something like that, I think the mistake we can make either on positive or negative is that will be handled in the upper precincts of like a campaign headquarters, right? But I think we all have to understand that it can seem like whack-a-mole, but if you see that in one of your feeds and, a friend or a family member is pushing it around, you got to jump in there. By the way, maybe nobody in that exchange will change their mind, but other people will see you doing it. And they'll say, you know what, I'm going to do that too. So we've got to fight back. I'm actually I am concerned about deepfakes. The things I'm most concerned is the disinformation and the lies. I mean, I've seen focus group results recently in some battleground states where swing voters, so these are not Trump MAGA partisans, are saying, I'm concerned that I might not be able to eat steak anymore if the Democrats win, right? Or this kind of stuff, takes hold. We used to think if it didn't lead the New York Times or the nightly news, you shouldn't pay attention to it. Anything now can spread around the world in a minute and infect phones and computers in battleground states. So we just got to be on this. And I know that's a lot to ask of people, but, it's only 7 or 8 months and it's only the fate of the world. So we all have to get into the game.
It's just life and death. So let me ask you a question about how the game of politics should be played, particularly when it comes to fighting back. And we talked about that a little bit just now. How do you today complete the very famous phrase, when they go low?
We don't go as low, but we do. We're willing to throw some kidney punches.
You're no longer saying we go high.
Yeah.
You're no longer saying we go high.
No. I still think we need to motivate people. I don't think we have to lie to win. By the way, if we lose this election, I may revise that thought. But I think we can win, but by being tough. Talking about, going after Hunter Biden.
Right.
I'd put all 3 of his kids squarely in the sights, and hopefully Mike Bloomberg will do this and run tens of millions of dollars of advertising.
I mean, he's hinted at it. Tim O'Brien, who advises him, has put out some tantalizing posts on social media saying you're going to learn a lot more about his kids and his son-in-law. Fair game for you?
Absolutely is fair game. Trump's mental capacity, fair game. His sexual assaults, fair game in advertising. Like, it all's fair game. Like, nothing's more important in the history of the world than who we elect as president in 2020. I mean, maybe 1860 rivals it in terms of import. So yes, sometimes I think we as a party, would rather be right than to win. I think you can be both. But, listen, Barack Obama inspired people. He is such an enormous person of great character. We never lied, but we ran tough campaigns, and it's what you have to do. So we do not have to follow them. And I think Biden lately has had some really great language around this. Like, just because they're going that low, we don't have to go that low. But that doesn't mean we can't win. And we better not assume people will just discount things that are so crazy. Like, we can't believe anybody would believe that. You mean, if Biden's the nominee, I mean, they're going to treat him as a socialist, the same as Bernie. It'll be like, your taxes are going to triple if you're a worker. You will not be allowed to eat meat anymore. You're never going to be allowed to fly on an airplane. And we'll laugh at this.
Are they going to say Biden's from Kenya too?
Well, they might. Maybe that would help Biden, actually. He needs make him a little more exotic. But I think that it's a great question. And, for me, there's like in campaigns, there's, your main messaging, your economic message, differences on healthcare and taxes. But you have to understand, particularly with social media, there's all these sideshows, and you need to create your own sideshows and fight back on theirs. And Trump's a bully. I was reminded, Preet, I went on Fox and Friends earlier in the week to talk about my book. And, we had a talk about one of the reasons people have to get so involved in the election is because Fox is like Trump's Pravda. It's his happy place. And, one of the hosts in particular really took offense at like that. But the other reason I think we need to be tough is bullies don't like to be bullied, right? I mean, Donald Trump will tweet when he sees Donna Brazile on Fox. This is how easily he's disturbed. So I just think we need to be in his grill in ways that make him uncomfortable. There's some psyops around this, which is how do you destabilize your opponent? But yeah.
You're going psyops now. Wow.
Well, I think it's really important. I really think it's important. And he's so easy to read, right? It's not hard to figure out how to throw he and his team off their game. I do worry about that. Like, one is, our nominee doesn't have a lot of time to put that together. The Bloomberg effort to me is a huge part of this because those guys take no prisoners. They got a lot of money. They're super sophisticated. Now, they'll have to be outside the nominee's campaign. So that's not as effective as being in, but it can be effective. But yeah, I think this is really important. Now, that doesn't mean we don't take our mind off talking about the trade war and the effect it had in Wisconsin, that we're in a manufacturing recession right now in large parts of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Obviously, healthcare is a debate we have to win. I'm not suggesting we don't do those, but I think we also have to understand that we got to fight super hard. We don't have to fight as dirty as they are, but, we're not going to win the presidency of this guy by playing by different rules, in my view.
Who should be doing that kind of tough attacking? I mean, it seems to me that Trump has broken what was an unwritten cardinal rule of politics, which is you stay sunny, the candidate himself stays sunny and positive like Reagan did, and then the other people muddy themselves by saying the terrible things. Here, Trump is the guy who does the bullying and the name calling and everything else. Should Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders take that upon themselves because it's their adversary who's doing it? Or can you really delegate that down?
Right. Well, that is authentic to Trump. So the one thing you don't ever want to do in politics is be inauthentic. So I don't think either of those guys are necessarily, Triumph the insult dog, right, or comics. So right. I think, they can throw punches and they should. And I think when they're fighting on behalf of people and their outrage is on behalf of people, Americans who are being harmed by Trump, that's great. But, I don't think they should trade insult for insult. But that's where, your campaign, number one, outside groups, number two, all of us who have audiences, number three, have an ability to do that. So I don't think necessarily Trump or Sanders should match Trump blow for blow. They need to be tough, and particularly in the debates. And I know Trump's saying he's not going to debate, and maybe he won't. I found it hard to believe, as much as he likes the spotlight, that he ultimately won't. And so in those, I think, you do not want to show one whiff of weakness. And so, those are going to be geriatric cage matches of kind of historic proportions. They're going to be something to watch. But I think at its core, you want to drive your message and you want to make people think you're going to run through a wall to fight for them. That's sadly the campaign within a campaign. Trump won last time. He was going to fight for working people. But you cannot look weak. And that will be his fundamental debate strategy, which is I want to bring either Biden or Sanders to heel. And Trump's tough in that way because, as you just said, he will say anything. He will go anywhere. He'll throw ordinance at you that you couldn't believe he would do. Remember when he brought all the women to the second debate?
Yeah.
And, by the way,